Tongaat Hulett reported full-year results showing a 19% rise in revenue to 14.3 billion rand. The sugar producer also saw headline earnings increasing by 18% to 1 billion rand. And joining us on the line now from Durban is Peter Stader. He's the CEO of Tongaat Hulett. Peter, thanks so much for joining us today. And I'm going to start off with a question that came through from a viewer this morning. He's questioning whether the company has actually fared as well as it possibly could have, given the kind of start it had in the first half. There we saw HEPS up 27%. Looking at today's numbers, it seems that we're looking at a tale of two halves here.
I would say that's a bit of an exaggeration. You know, what you have in a company is you've got pluses and minuses. Some of our operations that did a lot better in the second half than in the first half, particularly our starch business and particularly our land development activities. What did happen in South African sugar operations is that in October we had 5 times the long-term mean, and eventually if you still have this big rain while you're milling sugar cane, the land gets saturated and a lot of the cane stayed back in the ground, which obviously had quite an impact on the full year.
Looking at your land conversion and development, I mean, this is quite startling, the increase in percentage terms from 215 million to 350 million in 2013. That's operating profit. How much more is there for you to develop? How much more land do you have?
We're actually picking up pace in that area, and this is just, you know, the start of it. If you look at our outlook statement, we spell it out quite briefly. But one of the pleasing things at the moment is that provincial government, Interquini and ourselves, you know, are rapidly working together to accelerate the pace at which north of Durban will develop. And during this next period, there's a lot of land that will actually be what we call become shovel-ready, meaning all the EIAs, all the infrastructures in place, and people can move in and start building.
If you're looking at that land management and property segment of the business, Peter, just how much of a component do you see that part of the business becoming?
Look, it plays up and down. In terms of numbers of people, I often tell people we only employ some 70 people there. We employ more than 42,000 people, so it's a small portion in terms of that element. But we've got a big asset there, and it's been built up over many years. It's a very valuable asset, and we carefully manage that to extract value from it for all stakeholders. And we actually find that the way to do it is very often to build good models where everybody benefits. We're very proud on the Economia housing development, for example, which is one of the benchmark lowest socioeconomic end developments in the country.
Peter, I'm looking at your outlook statement now, and we'll come to that later on. But when you get an outlook statement or a prospect statement from a JSE-listed company, it's normally, yes, we expect the earnings to be under pressure because of the state of the South African economy, and it's usually one paragraph. Your statement is more like a book, which tells me that you're optimistic and you've got lots of things to say. Before we get to that, though, let's have a look at the basis of your business. Sugar. You've increased your sugar production. How's the price been, and what are the prospects for increasing that sugar production even further?
Like most things, there's a short-term story and there's a long-term story. On the longer-term one, the real exciting thing for us is in the world, you've got a 2% per annum growth in sugar production. You've got a very high cost base to establish your sugar mills, and we sit with unutilized milling capacity. So we've said for some time now, our major focus in the business is actually to work with all the stakeholders to get more cane to fill up our sugar mills itself. Right at the moment, we still sit, even after this year, with more than 850,000 tons of unutilized milling capacity. If you had to build that today, that would be 13.6 billion rand, by the way. At the same time, we've established a good pace. 2 years ago, we grew our sugar production by 144,000 tons. In this last year, we grew it by 104,000 tons, and we were able to put out a forecast that we expect in the next year to grow it by another 110,000 tons. When you go at the pace of about 100,000 tons, that's about the pace of half a sugar mill a year. Most people, it takes them 4 or 5 years to get a new sugar mill full. And that's the biggest theme in it. But obviously in the short term, there are some dynamics. Right at the moment, one of the bigger dynamics is on the sugar prices. They're quite depressed, and they're reasonably, a little bit down, but they change very quickly. Obviously, we benefit from the currency right at the moment.
Peter, when it comes to the cane supply, in fact, that's something that you've managed to get right in Zimbabwe. I mean, cane deliveries from private and third-party farmers on that end growing substantially. What are some of the lessons learned there that you can possibly draw on as you try and do the same here in South Africa? There's an ongoing strategy to increase cane supply in South Africa as well.
I think the biggest thing we've learned over years, and we've got a long history working in this sort of mode, but I can't over-amplify it. You know, if you try to run a business just within your own farmland and within your own walls, you've got certain possibilities. If you can migrate from that to partnerships, you're at a very different place. And you'll see very often when you read about Tongaat Hulett, you know, private-public partnerships, you see partnership with communities, you see partnerships with private growers. And like anything in a partnership, you've got to be clear in your mind who brings what to the partnership. When we interface with community and private and smaller scale growers, it's very clear to us that the biggest thing that we've got to bring to the party is to make sure that they establish their roots very well. And sugarcane, when you establish new roots, they last you often up to 10 years, but it's the big investment and it sets the pattern of your yields and your competitiveness. In many cases, we find in that process we can pull in government. In Zimbabwe, Bank ABC was the main funder. In South Africa, might have just seen, we just signed an agreement with Gilma Trust area. They, by the way, control more than 2.7 million hectares of land in KZN. They've got more than 200,000 hectares that they would like to put under cane, much more than we need. But we're working together with them to get grant funding to help them to develop cane in that area. But that's sort of the pattern from which we work. And then it doesn't always go even. 2 years ago, we grew in Mozambique by 42%. Last year, we grew by 28% in Zimbabwe. This is the year we expect big growth in South Africa.